Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the show. We're pleased to have Brian Ostroff, president of Arianne Phosphate, on the show again. There's a reason why we have Brian on so often. I think we're just going to call the company, so people aren't confused, we're just going to call you Food. And we'll list the stock. But really, because you keep it real simple for people, why we saw months ago we wanted to have you on. Things we're developing out there. We've got lots to talk about in this space: fertilizer, food, scarcity, Ukraine, you name it. But I think Austin, you had a couple of things to jump in first. But yeah, I just want to kind of let people know, when we have a guest on this often, it's for a reason, and I think we're going to get into some of that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, always a pleasure to have you on. I'll jump right in here. I know you were just down in Tampa at a conference. Do you maybe want to kind of let everyone know what that was? What was the tone down there, and kind of what conversations were you having?
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate the time and the ability to speak with your listeners about what is, and what we continue to say is an incredibly important topic. So, yeah, Austin, I did spend earlier this week in Tampa. There was a conference, a crude phosphate conference, but Tampa is also a pretty big center in the fertilizer world. There's a couple of big companies head office there. I'd say the mood was bleak. There's just no sugarcoating it. You could really see where some of the issues that have been brewing, whether it was the Chinese halting their shipments of phosphate, which was announced in November and December. At the time, the Russians had put on export quotas. There was definitely the fear starting to build, but you could just see and smell the concern. Prices, everyone's forecast for where prices were going to go, and access to materials that we need to build and get the fertilizer going so that you could get the crops and all that. Well, that's all out the window. Certainly things like security of supply have continued to become extremely, extremely important. And so, in a way, that the timing of the conference really couldn't have been any better.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, go
I was
ahead,
just say, it's with these niche markets, it's tough because you're in them and you're with experts and you're one yourself and you're like-minded people together. And it's like, you want to shout out to the world, like, listen, there's a serious issue here. How do we get this through to you? And even before the events between Ukraine and Russia, which we'll dive into that as well, that, whether it's inflation, logistics, supply chain issues, these were like dire issues before. And it isn't just the pricing and economic mechanisms of these things. Like, we're getting now to a point of what countries are absolutely dependent upon this for food, and and we won't go down because it's very doom and gloom, but we're getting to like life and death type of conversations, and that's where it becomes more rather an opportunistic, hey, there's a way to game the market thing, to no, there's serious issues here and a fundamental societal issue, and that's, I don't want to downplay that, and I don't want to also fearmonger, but we need solutions fast.
Yeah, well, look, first and foremost, the humanitarian side, you see what's going on, and I mean, your heart just melts. It's terrible. So look, first and foremost, there's this massive human cost that just cannot be understated. But beyond that, look, that part of the world, Russia is a huge player in many commodities, and fertilizer and the components for fertilizer being one of them. And of course, beyond that, you've got Ukraine, and they're a big producer of grains and wheat. And so look, in terms of Russia, straight up, look, where are we at? So they've already said, yeah, I'll come to that in a second. But with regards to Russia itself, it is a huge player in, as I said, a lot of commodities, a lot of the fertilizers. Even if they were willing to trade, you can't. The Black Sea is basically closed. You can't get insurance for the ships that go there. With Russia now basically excluding from the banking world, how do you finance those transactions? And so that's all gone. On top of that, the oligarchs, a lot of them have been sanctioned, including the oligarchs that own some of the largest fertilizer companies. So that's all gone. If you talk about particular to my world, what comes out of Russia? Well, they have phosphate. They have a lot of natural gas, right? Ammonia. Most of the ammonia products, they're sourced with natural gas out of the ex-Soviet Union. And so let's talk about that for a second. All right. Back at the end of last year, because you saw a bump in the price of natural gas into Europe, a lot of the companies that made those ammonia-based, nitrogen-based fertilizers, they had halted their production. It wasn't going to work. And then supply started to come back on. They were able to make their products. But with what's gone on now, I mean, there's just no way. And I could give you a list of maybe 6 or 7 companies that just in the last week have already announced that they are not going to be producing these ammonia-based fertilizers. Well, that's a huge problem. Ammonia, it's used in a lot of different fertilizers, including, the A in MAP and the A in DAP. That's ammonia. And so that's going away. Like in some cases, I think I saw where Lithuania, for example, about 50% of the natural gas that they get actually goes into the production of ammonia fertilizers. Wow. So that's gone. Sulfur, I'm sure no one who listens to this show pays much of attention to sulfur and understand how important it is. But, sulfur prices have tripled. And so you need sulfur to make sulfuric acid, which is what you do with phosphate and mix with to make the liquids that you then turn into fertilizer. And yeah, look, thanks for bringing up that chart. Look at what's going on here. Look at that, your chart on the right, the sulfur price. I mean, they've already been climbing huge, and maybe they don't even look as dramatic, but sulfur, you look at that chart, it was basically 100 a year ago. It was, I guess, what was that? Towards the end of the year, had traded through 600, now trading at 800. Look at ammonia. Look at the phosphate rock price. I mean, everything is going and going and going. We've got a real problem. And the challenge is not only from price, but it's even a matter of access. So if this is moved and you can't get your natural gas to make your ammonia, you're not going to have it regardless of the price. So, in Western Europe, Your challenge is going to be you're not going to have enough, and that means your yields on your crops are going to be lower. So come next fall, there's just going to be less stuff coming out of the ground. And so that's, obviously a problem. But even food and you brought the graphic up previously, but maybe I'd bring it up again here to really touch on it. So the Ukraine is regarded as the breadbasket of Europe, but
Yes.
in reality, it's the breadbasket of Europe a little and the Middle East a lot.
Yes.
They are a huge, huge, huge producer of wheat, as is Russia. But let's look at these countries on that list and understand who's not going to be getting it. And to make it clear, right, that they're not going to be getting it because spring planting isn't going to happen. Even if by some miracle peace happens tomorrow, it's too late. You're not going to be able to get everyone back into the fields. And so like the crop is gone this year. And so look, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, like these guys are on that list, and we get phosphate from there. And look, certainly one of the topics that no one really wanted to talk about at the conference, but everyone very much understood what caused Arab Spring. Well, it was food. It wasn't, dictatorship. And, that was nothing compared to, I think, what we're going to be seeing as we get into the summer and early fall. It's not coming. And so you can have even more instability caused by the lack of food and the instability that it could well cause in some of these countries where the world then gets its phosphate from. So, I mean, unfortunately, we are really shaping up for big, big troubles. And I don't see how this remedies itself. And, it's kind of, we're caught in the sense that you've got supply problems that are causing higher prices, and those higher prices are in turn could well cause supply problems, which is going to cause the higher costs and access and around and around and around we go. And so, look, obviously, security of supply is a major, major, major factor, and it's been brought home once again. So, unfortunately, we've really got some challenges. We've talked a lot about this on your show before. Look, we kind of said if your food bill goes from 10% to 20% here of what your budget is spent on food, but there are places in the world now that are well past 100%. And even here, the 10 to 20 probably now looks more like 10 to 30. So it's a real issue. So look, I think people understand. Unfortunately, maybe they're starting to understand a little late, but this is where we are. Look, we've always talked that with Arianne and our phosphate, and we are an answer, whether it's powering your body through food or maybe powering some of your energy requirements because of the LFPs. And I'm sure one of the things that a lot of your viewers realized from last week is, look what happened to nickel prices. Nickel prices went to $100,000.
$100,000. Yeah.
Well, some of the other battery technologies, they're nickel based, and that's a real problem. There's a problem in cost, and again, there's that whole rethinking of where do you source your needed inputs. And so I think this is going to continue to drive the LFP battery. In fact, Rivian was on CNBC this morning, and they were talking about how they're moving their batteries following Tesla over to the LFPs. And so the LFP, there you go. So, I mean, again, where are people going to get? And they need the P in LFP, and they need the P in MAP, and they need the P in DAP, and they need the P in P4. Look, I think that kind of brings us back here to Arianne and how we are an answer. And can
I just jump in for 1 second just to clear up a nickel question here too, because we're not really talking too much about nickel. We want to bring it up, and Norilsk is obviously a massive supplier of nickel coming out of Russia. And someone's asking about the price. I wouldn't even attempt to say what the price of nickel is going to be. I mean, it jumped so ridiculously high there. But I think it just shows the commodities market as a whole, as people start to realize, because people forget the mining sector is quite small in regards to other ones. And a lot of just generalists and other people out there are just coming to light as to, okay, what makes all this stuff work? And now that you've cut off Russia's supply of nickel to the world, and once again, even if you turn it back on in a couple of days, that gap in flow is a huge gap of flow. When you see how intricate everything was last minute delivery type of things, hurry up and wait type of stuff. It's important to keep that in the back of the mind. And then, of course, when we talk about the lithium iron and then the phosphate, the specific quality of the product that you have at your site makes your company stand out specifically. And we can't get into it, but I imagine at the conference too, there's probably all sorts of backroom talks and this and that and everything, because you're in with experts that understand and know what's happening. But I wanted to draw back to people that the reason why we also wanted Arianne on the show was because of the quality of that asset in the ground. Because there's lots of other companies that one could talk about, but it's not only was there the big macro trend, but it was, okay, do we have anything in Canada that can kind of supply mostly the food? Because that just, like you even say, the food is the critical part. I mean, that's.
So I'm going to jump off on your comments in a couple of places. So the fellow who asked, how long can this last? How long can the high nickel prices last? Or how long will it take with regards to natural gas or any of these other issues? Look, the event has happened. There was already a move towards people starting to get concerned about their security of supply. This really has unleashed that. And so, as we talked about earlier, even if you get to a point where by some miracle peace breaks out, and it's not going to go back to, oh, that's okay, we'll go back to relying on them for our nickel, for our ammonia, for our phosphate, for our wheat, our anything like that is gone. It is going to take 10 years of peaceful relationships before people will start to trust again. So with that, everyone, all the more reason they are going to worry about their security of supply and how they get it and where they get it from and what's the jurisdiction and how can I integrate and be fully vertically integrated. And so, look, fertilizer is a huge component that comes out of Russia, as is nickel, as is oil, and that. This is very acute. It's interesting. And it's something that I think we had talked about after the Chinese had pulled out of the phosphate fertilizer market and exports. And at the time I said, I'm not sure you understand quite how significant it is because it's phosphate. So I'm going to go back and revisit that statistic.
Yes, yes.
China is 30% of the phosphate fertilizer market, the global trade. And so let's think about that. Russia, I believe, is about 7% of the oil market. Look what's gone on in the oil market. Well, what do you think's going on in the fertilizer market when China walks and now Russia walks? I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but I don't know how much of the natural gas market and what goes into ammonia, but that's all gone. It's all gone. And so look, people knew that. Maybe they didn't act on it. Corporates, I think, are really understanding it. You know, Arianne's got a very important deposit. To your point, it does, whether it's the phosphate that we need for fertilizer or the phosphate that some of these guys want for specialty applications. You know, that's important. Now, you know, we also put out some news maybe about 3-4 weeks ago on work that we are doing for alternative fertilizers, direct applications. You know, this is very, very important and interesting stuff. Again, if you want to talk about security of supply, being integrated. So currently what happens is the phosphate that you mine, you turn into a concentrate, you send it to a phosphoric acid plant, it gets turned into fertilizer and comes back as MAP and DAP. So here in Canada, for instance, we don't have a phosphoric acid plant. So look, we can send our stuff, and we're looking to cut deals with guys that have the phosphoric acid plants, and then it comes back to Canada by way of MAP and DAP. But we're doing some work with groups, you know, on the research side, but even some work with some corporates on things like direct application that would cut out the need of a phosphoric acid plant, where it can get mixed with organics, with compost, with things like that, and be applied directly to the farmer's field. And so, look, that's going to give you your security of supply. That is going to cut down Arianne's reliance on bigger guys for their phosphoric acid plants. And guess what? You know, some of these things, you're not going to need ammonia. You're going to move away from the need of natural gas and ammonia to make the MAP and the DAP. You'll no longer need that. Like, that's
a huge move.
Changing stuff. And one of the things that allows that to happen is the nature of Arianne's phosphate. So not only do we have a lot of it, not only are we permitted, you know, we are a shovel-ready project, but we've got a phosphate that would allow use in all these other applications, including direct application, and working with groups that can figure out the best way to liberate the phosphate in our concentrate and get it, you know, as a nutrient right into the ground. We're doing a lot of that work too.
And so with this, the ability to kind of use it in alternative kind of ways, that not only is going to kind of cut out the middleman sort of not having to worry about, okay, we don't need ammonia, we don't need natural gas to develop this fertilizer, but by doing that, we're also kind of talking about it being much more environmentally friendly overall, are we not?
Absolutely. Look, you're removing the needs for acids, you know, so that's a big deal. A very big deal. Like, again, our stuff is clean. We don't have cadmium. We don't have radioactive elements. This was a big deal beforehand. It's a really big deal now. You know, at the conference, we did a presentation, and it was really focused on the green aspect. Like Arianne, aside from everything else, has the green project. You know, right now, about 75% of all of our power requirements on the entire project is going to be hydroelectricity, clean, green, renewable. And guess what? You know, by not being reliant on the fossil fuels, when the fossil fuels go up 20, 30, 50%, what do you think that's going to do to the cost of a lot of these other mines?
Yeah.
And that's not going to affect us in any way near the same. And so we've got that, you know, to your point, it's a clean concentrate. If we can then use it in the direct application market, that's going to be huge. And so the other thing, look, most phosphates are nasty. Most phosphates, even if you have those technologies and partner up with the guys that can take your phosphate and get it properly on the ground, it's going to work for us, but it's not going to work for a lot of other phosphates, because farmers aren't going to use a direct application of a phosphate concentrate that's high in heavy metals or radioactive elements.
Yep.
So, I mean, it really continues to put us in a great position.
Yeah, and I like the fact that we emphasize, because we've been talking about, you know, pretty dire situation and a dire market, and we never try to take advantage of that. But I've been saying for years now is that there's a lot of people out there who know what the problems are, and there are solutions. So the best thing you could do is either give your time or money to these groups that are trying to solve these major issues and problems in the world. And a company like yours is one of those. And that's where, when I've said at the beginning of the show, why we have you on a lot, is that we, you know, even it was not long ago when I didn't even realize that mining equaled food. So, I mean, that's me. I'm kind of in, you know, in the sector here. I'm in the markets a lot. It's amazing that people don't realize that, and how like foundational it is in every aspect of our life. And when you have a project like yours, once again, it's special. So, you know, you've got the project, you've got the relationships, you've got the clean aspect, which is critical. And, you know, and people can have a supply chain issue where we're not going to have to ship in containers across the world necessarily. There might be just supply to North America. That cuts down on those costs. So it's checkbox a lot of things very quickly. And, you know, just to kind of pivot this to just sheer market stuff. You know, we talk about Mosaic or Nutrien in the last year to date. They're, you know, I mean, Mosaic itself is up 92% for the year to date. Nutrien is up 62% almost year to date. And we're talking like Nutrien's almost $70 billion company. So people go, well, how big can these things go? That kind of move in a $50 billion company is significant. And we're not talking high tech with PE ratios of, you know, 3,000. This is stable. One would think, you know, gray, boring, stable, run-of-the-mill businesses that are experiencing massive growth. And they're going to be, if someone wants to get kind of in ahead of the curve on something, you have to find a project that's not a lot of people know about, with a stock that has the ability to make some money. And boom, we've got, not, I don't want to be too promotional on you, but you guys hit a lot of check boxes. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, look, you know, if you want to start kind of running some market metrics and what have you. So today we have roughly $120 million, or 125 Canadian, you know, kind of 90, 95 US. When we published our feasibility, we had an NPV of just under $2 billion. I mean, we are trading at 5% of our NPV. But of course, since then, with the way prices have gone up, you know, if we produce 3 million tons a year, every $10 move in the price of phosphate is an extra 30 million that's going to flow down to our bottom line. Well, prices are up a good $100, $120, $150. Like the numbers are incredible. And, I can't really talk because it's not 43,101,
No.
but
Yeah.
you can start to run, well, based on their published number, they were
Yes.
at roughly a $2 billion NPV. It's going to be more now. And the irony is our stock today would need a 25% move just to get back to the market cap it had in 2012, which was the last time people kind of thought about FERTs. And so, it's just, look, I've been doing this for 35 years, capital markets guy, and it's really kind of hard to even understand how this could be. And so I think the people that do some homework, looking for stories, learn about Arianne, this thing's a necessary project, but it's also an incredibly inexpensive project. And a lot of times I focus on the macro, and I get asked a lot, well, why do you focus so much on the macro? And I say, well, because at the end of the day, we are what we are. We are already the biggest. We are the purest. We are the safest. So, what's really, as the macro gets better and it gets tighter and tighter, look, what do we need, to put the puck in the net? And it's a couple more offtakes, or it's a partner. And so you've got to believe that as these macros continue to move in our favor, that's probably increasing the likelihood of us getting our partner or our offtakes or what have you. So, and there's just not a whole lot of ways to be involved in it. So there's the big cap guys. You talked earlier about the moves we've seen. Arianne is really the play if things like security of supply and quality, and even if eating matters to you, Arianne should probably merit a look if you're an investor. And the valuation is just, look, I'm sure you don't have too many CEOs that come on your show and talk about how expensive their stock is. So,
No.
But really, you look at the metrics, and it's just hard to find anything that is even a remote comparison to the valuation versus the
and it's just market, it's just awareness. And I mean, it goes without saying because we're in the space, but I mean, Quebec, talk about mining friendly, and they are ahead of the curve, especially considering like all of Canada and in provinces specific. It's a great place to be for this. So it isn't like, there's going to be issues. No, I mean, they are easy to work with. They especially on any kind of energy like EV and battery type of, they're light years ahead of, I'd say, a lot of other provinces. But for them, I don't think it's a very tough conversation to explain not only the high grade you have for the battery energy side, but the food. Just, I mean, they get it. I mean, it's a great province to be in as well. So if someone who's just kind of generalist and they're not sure, is that you're in the right place.
Yeah, look, again, putting back on my investor hat, ag makes a lot of sense. If you have a portfolio, ag related FERTs, they're not market correlated.
Yeah.
Everyone's concerned about inflation, and believe me, people should be concerned about inflation. But what's going to inflate? Well, food prices. So how do you protect against that? Is by making investments in something that is directly correlated.
Yes.
So that's where Arianne is. And so I think that with growing attention, I don't see how a valuation like ours remains where it is. I don't see it. And
Perfect.
Unfortunately, things are getting worse, not better.
No.
I think I showed you guys earlier before we were on air, picture that I took just a couple of weeks ago, supermarket here in Montreal. This isn't out in the middle of nowhere. And I walked down this, yeah, there it is. That was me walking down the cereal aisle, and like, look at that.
Yeah,
Look at
empty
that.
shelves. Yeah, you see this all across
That is
America.
scary.
Yeah.
So,
and that's America. Now imagine, like we kind of talked about, but imagine now, like this is like North America. You see this all across the US as well. Now imagine you are a developing nation. What's that going to look like? Like, it's frightening.
Like? And what's that going to look like in countries that produce phosphate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what took Tunisia out of the phosphate market, was their Arab Spring.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of hate to be ending as such a downer here, but look, we've got some challenges. I think the good news is it's always these catastrophic events that cause people to think and change and rework the supply. Where do they get? How do they do? How do they make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? I guess the good news on that is Arianne goes a long way to addressing a lot of these issues.
And that's why we want to keep the focus, is that, the capital markets is the best way to solve problems. And if you put your money towards solutions, that's the best thing I think any investor could do, because you're helping a core foundation of the world, of civilization. I'd rather people be, rather than marching the streets talking about a problem, is that, okay, great, we get this problem, let's solve them. And this is a way that you can actually solve a problem in the most efficient and effective way.
Yeah. And look, even to your point, we're now looking to solve a problem that I might have understood that it was going to be a problem, but most people didn't. You go and you take it for granted, right? And no one who knew about phosphate. Who cares? Who cares about fertilizer? Blah, 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 blah.
We talk about flying cars and self-driving cars. Like, who cares? I don't want to talk about phosphate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But look, now I've said it. I'll say it again. I understand. Gold is sexy. Oil is sexy. Can't eat gold. Can't drink oil. This is the stuff that matters. And look, it's no longer falling on deaf ears.
Yeah.
Maybe still some deaf ears in the investment community, but
they're coming around. Yeah, they'll come around for sure. And just to wrap it up, Austin might have a final comment. I'll just let everyone know we're working on a bit of a fertilizer report too, and kind of a starter guide, let's call it. So I'm gonna work on that all weekend as well. So we'll get that out to people if they sign up on the website. But there's speed that's required at this point too, and it is a level of urgency when people say, well, how fast should we be looking? These should have been solved a while ago, so this needs to happen fast. And that's my 2 cents worth on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was the first time we had you on, Brian, you made a comment that it's incredibly hard to rule over hungry people. And we're going to see that same sort of thing coming into it again. But the more attention that we can bring to this kind of story and a way that we can solve these critical issues, the better. So we always appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat to us and help draw the parallels and connect the dots for people.
Well, look, I really appreciate it. I appreciate the soapbox to stand upon and let people know what's going on. And still, things have changed a bit, and you can pick up the paper, or you're starting to see things about food and fertilizer that just maybe wasn't there a couple of months ago. But it's still, I think, a bit of a ways from the psyche. But that's starting to change. And as it comes into the psyche, people are going to look for ways and for better or for worse, investors, they look to try and figure out how to profit from what's going on. And there's just not that many ways to do it in this space.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Brian, for being on and keeping us informed, and also reach out to us too, because you send excellent kind of updates and reports. I mean, you're flying around. You're an expert in this field. You're just back from Tampa, so if you want to get more of this information as well, make sure you reach out to us, and we'll introduce you to Brian. You can get on his mailing list too, so you can see some of the vital stats that he's bringing into this whole market. Never mind just the project itself. So. Make sure you reach out to us, everyone. And sorry to have more of a dire one today, but it's because it's necessary, and we need people to start acting sooner than later.
Absolutely. Look, again, thanks a lot. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Appreciate
Take care,
it. Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Have a great weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.